See how these curves are pulling in on themselves and they look lumpy? This is what happens when you don't clip your seams. Let me show you why this matters and how to fix it. Hi, I'm Misty from the Plushie class, and today we're going to talk about clipping our seams. When we are making plushed animals, we have a lot of curved seams. I have some examples here. A curve that goes this way called a concave curve, a curve that goes this way called a convex curve. When you sew curves and then you don't clip them, we try to turn them right side out and it creates a bunch of tension. That tension, when you turn it right side out, prevents the fabric from making the shape that you wanted. This is a mistake that a lot of beginners make, but we're in luck because it is a super easy fix. And once you learn this trick, you will never go back. I'm going to show you exactly what clipping does, when to do it, and how to do it so that you get those perfect seams that you have been wanting. I've sewn this shape right here. When we flip it right side out and we don't clip our seams, look what happens. We get these weird little lines. It doesn't sit nicely. It can be wrinkly. Really is fighting against itself because all of that extra seam allowance has nowhere to go. Let's turn this one right side out and see what happens. So it really won't sit nicely because those curves are fighting the seam allowance in the fabric. And look at these wrinkles that we get. I also have some claws here because this is super applicable to stuffed animals and they are the perfect example. Let's try to flip these over without clipping our seams and see what happens. Okay, see how it's all bunching up? The middle one won't even come out all the way and it just doesn't want to sit nicely. So let's see what happens when we clip our seams. This is the tool that I always choose to use to clip my seams. These scissors are the best. I have never had a better pair of scissors than these, and I have gone through a ton of little scissors. Let me tell you why these scissors are so great. They are fat at the tip, or wide at the tip, so they're extra strong. And it's not very obvious, but these blades are actually serrated. So it really is strong at grabbing that fabric and just snipping right through it. So these scissors, I will tell you, are the Kai's 5150. They're called the rag quilt scissors. So if they're cutting through rag quilts, they can handle our thick fabric, our thick minky, our furs just fine. I have had these for years and I still love them. They are the best scissors. And don't judge me. This is kind of silly, but every time I clip my seams, I sing this song. Clip, clip, clip your seams carefully down the curve. Merrily, 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 merrily. Okay, that's enough of that. But you know what? Now every time you clip your seams, you're going to sing that song too. So you're welcome. Okay, so this is a concave curve, and I always remember that it is a curve that goes inside because of the word cave, and it goes in like a cave. And to clip in a concave curve needs just straight perpendicular clips right to the thread, the sewing line, but don't cut into the sewing line. You don't want to weaken your stitching, but I like to cut them about 1/4 inch apart. I think that's a good amount. Can you see that? That's how we cut it. Okay, so let's turn it around and let's see how much easier it sits now that it is clipped. And this would be a lot more obvious if it was ironed too, but I'll use my finger irons, which is surprisingly effective. Okay. See how much better that sits? And it wants to sit without you holding it. Impressive, huh? That's cool, right? Okay, so clipping your seams makes a big difference. This is a convex curve. And if we need to reduce bulk, which when we're sewing stuffed animals, we don't always need to reduce the bulk, but sometimes we do. So if you need to reduce the bulk of the thread, you have to take notches out. You do notches instead of just perpendicular lines. So let's turn this one around and see the difference it makes. See that? So easy, and it sits so nicely. Use our finger irons. And it wants to sit right on that sew line when you clip those seams. I think that is so cool. Good example, right? Okay, but now let's actually do it on a plush part. And these are the claws that I made, and they have super tight curves. And we want to make sure that these flip out and that they'll sit nicely on their own without having to tug. Let's clip it and see what happens. So these tips, I like to just cut them off. And sometimes I'll even just go like this, because we don't need all that extra fabric in there, stopping that from coming out all the way. And then here's a trick for you. Instead of making an actual point down here like the fabric would indicate, if you go to the end and then you just do 1 or 2 stitches straight across and then back up again, that's gonna give it a little bit more room to flip as well. This is especially important for tiny pieces. You would think that it would be less sharp if you do that, but really it just gives it the room that it needs in order to sit nicely. So let's flip this one around and see how it does. Okay, there it is. Look how much easier that was and how much better it sits because we clipped those seams. That's pretty cool, right? I think that's cool. Okay, so how do we know which clips need clipping and which ones need notching? Well, if it's a concave, it just needs clipping. If you need to remove bulk, like we did at the tips, you actually notch it or remove fabric. And these little between the nails, they only needed clipping. If you need to remove bulk and it's a convex curve, then you have to notch it. Easy peasy. The tighter the curve, the more clipping it's gonna need. You need to clip corners, and straight edges don't need to be clipped. Okay, we're done. So clipping and notching may seem like a small trivial thing, but now you know how big of a difference it makes in the finished plush. It changes it from making it a homemade lumpy plush to a homemade professional plush. And when you understand why these things work, it helps make you more independent and make wise decisions when you're designing your own plush. If you would like, you can join us at the Plushie class over on school. The link is down below, where we're talking about making plush, helping each other, and designing things together. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.